Hi, my name is Evita Maureen, and I am the CEO at Rise Recovery. Thank you for joining us today. So, a little bit about what we're doing. This is another episode of Rising Together. And today's episode, we are discussing living with an addicted loved one. It's a really important topic that is not talked about enough because usually the focus, as I think a lot of our guests can relate to today, is focused on the person needing recovery and not so much on the family system that person in recovery impacts. And so I'd like to begin the topic with something that I saw written by a person in recovery recently because it was related to COVID. And what they said was that COVID is like having an addict living in your household. And I never thought of it that way, but he went on, when you have an addict living in your household, the addict is the focus of the family. When the addict is the focus of the family, all of the family conversations are about the addict. One of the family members may have just won a special award, but the addict was just arrested, so it goes unnoticed. One of the family members may have rebelled and gets kicked out of school, but instead of being asked, "Are you okay? What's going on with you?" they're scolded for being selfish because we have an addict in the family and they need our help at this time. One of the family members is just quiet all of the time because they don't want to be in any conflict or do not want to selfishly ask for attention that should be directed toward the addict. One of the family members will be joking all of the time because for him or her, it is easier to laugh away the seriousness of what is going on in the family. And that really, really struck me because in this time, I think all of us can relate to those moments in our families' lives when COVID has taken over. And truly, I felt like this was a wonderful and important parallel to make because it means that all of us can create a baseline of understanding what it might be like to have an addict in the family. And the people in our world who are struggling with a loved one who's not yet in recovery or is struggling to recover, they're more frequent than you know. And that's one of the reasons why today's guests are so special to me because the people in this room today are all leaders in our community. They are influencers. They are people who are making a difference for our city, and they know what it's like to love someone who needs recovery. And so with that, I'd love to kick off this discussion by sharing who we have today. Our guests include Jeff Arndt, the president and CEO of VIA Metropolitan Transit, Frank Janousek, a peer recovery leader at Rise Recovery, and Beth Wammack, the CEO of GDC Marketing Ideation and a Rise Recovery board member. So with that, Jeff, if you don't mind, I'd love to start with you.
Sure.
Could you please tell me a little bit about your experience and why you were willing to come on today's show and talk with us?
Well, first of all, Evita, I ran into Evita at one of those rubber chicken luncheons, right? And we just kind of passed each other and talked. And just very briefly, I found out she worked for Rise. And I told her that it's been in my heart to share some of my experiences related to the recovery of a loved one. So I'm going to start back, though, because I've seen addiction from two different angles. I'm the adult child of an alcoholic father, and then I am the adult father of an alcoholic child. Young adult, actually, right? So I can tell you that, I mean, remarkably different experiences. I will say that whoever wrote that you just read must have been either my brother's or sister, because so much of that was very much the case in our house. When it's your father, your whole life is, my personal experience was, it was day-to-day survival. How could we keep him from going off the deep end? And I don't just mean drinking. I meant because when he drank, he became abusive and violent. And it was probably that behavior that we focused on more. And we had, this is in the 60s and the 70s. I don't think people knew that much about support systems. So we had nothing. We were just kind of going on our own, walking on eggshells, as you would say, trying to at least publicly appear like we're just another normal family. And actually, for the longest time, I thought we were a normal family. I thought all families had fathers like this. And later, as I grew up and started visiting friends, I found out that wasn't the case. Now, my father never went into recovery. And so I never had that experience. I certainly had learned behaviors, though, about how I dealt with being in a home with an addict. And so, unfortunately, my son spent about 12 years in addiction between years with crystal meth and years with alcohol. And unfortunately, I reverted to those behaviors, right? I knew those behaviors. So, at first it was like, oh, I can't believe how many Sudafed push packs does this kid need in his room, right? Never thinking there's something really not good going on. It was more like, oh, his allergies must be bad. Denial. I always say it's almost like, as they describe grieving, you go through all those steps. It is true that at that point, everyone in our family became just totally focused on how can we save him? That was really the resounding question. How can we save him? That's the wrong question. I say that from experience because we couldn't save him. I mean, really, the much better question is what can we do to save ourselves and make sure that we provide an environment that's supportive of recovery, but not supportive of continuing addiction. And I will tell you that I reached a point, we'd locked the doors and changed the keys, and he was on the road. And I reached a point when I was having extremely crazy, insane, and I mean that totally. It's just like, oh, it's crazy, insane thoughts. And I was looking in the mirror and I said, you need help. You need to find something. And so I was able to avail myself of Al-Anon, and it was literally a lifesaver. I spent the first hour, I think I cried for the entire first hour, couldn't say a thing. The next time I came back, I was able to at least say a little something, and then I went back to crying. And afterwards, one of the ladies came up and she goes, I know you're concerned. Your son's living on the street. You don't know where he is. You don't know when you're going to hear from him next, but you have to understand that what you did is you provided him an opportunity to live because you were providing him a perfectly safe, comfortable place to get deeper and deeper into his addiction. That changed everything. I will tell you that, my experience is you can't force somebody who's not interested in recovery into a recovery program. You can't force them. I mean, you can make them go, but it's not going to be very effective. When he finally reached that point, and it was 12 years, and I would have thought 3 years in a prison would have been his bottom, but it wasn't. Mm-hmm. So he reached a bottom, and he began AA, and he has now been sober nearly 9 years. And maybe the most beautiful part of the story is that he met his wife at AA. She's been sober going on 20 years. And she always tells a story that, for the first year, you're not supposed to get involved in relationships. And so she marked her calendar down. And when he got his 1 year chip, she asked him out.
That's
I think it's a great story. And they're married and they're solid and they both have people that they sponsor. And he has become the adult that I thought the little boy would be, as opposed to the addict person that was nothing like the little boy. And so it's just such a blessing.
Wow. That's such a powerful story. Thank you so much for being here today and for sharing that. I know in my heart and from the people that I've met in my role at Rise Recovery that you are connecting with someone right now who needs to hear exactly your words and who has experienced that struggle. And coming from someone as well known as you is might be what someone needs to feel brave about stepping out themselves. And that's the importance of having leaders share their story and contribute to sharing the hope that recovery, if not of a loved one, of yourself, is possible. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm so grateful for the opportunity.
Well, I'd love to hear from one of your colleagues in the community, another leader, Beth Wammack, our friend here, who's also the CEO of a major company, a marketing firm in town, GDC. Please share a little bit about your experience and why you became involved with Rise Recovery. That also, you mentioned Al-Anon, Jeff. Rise Recovery does have a family program that is in many ways similar to Al-Anon. Beth?
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you, Vita, very much. And Jeff, love your story. Thank you for sharing that. First of all, through our marketing efforts with the state of Texas, we get to work on all the impaired driving campaigns. And doing that work, we get to hear a lot of the testimony of the victims' families. And after hearing that for about 5 years, I was really touched about, drinking and driving and the impact that that makes on so many people. And I realized that those stories were actually probably could have been something that my sister could have done, because she had had numerous DWIs, had already served sentences, and that, she herself being an addict, that, I had lived this life with her in my family forever. And I just felt like there was something more that I needed to do. And Rise Recovery's name was mentioned a couple times, and that's when I felt compelled to join the board. And I think it was my first or second board meeting that I heard the statement that it was an issue, a family issue. And that's when it really spoke to me that I had never really dealt with that myself. That, and as you mentioned, Jeff, back then, because I've got a few years on myself here too, it was her problem. She started using drugs at the age of 13, and we just wanted her to get fixed. And so, and that's just what people did. They sent my sister away, and she would come back and she would still be broken, but we never dealt with it. And, she kept spinning, and my sister, she's still with us, but I don't have a relationship with her. Or when I do try to have a relationship with her, it's very difficult. And she's not in recovery right now. So through the years, we try to do this. And, for me, being involved with Rise is very, very hopeful. I may not be able to have that relationship with my sister, but if I'm able to help any other family, I want to be able to give them that hope. And I am a parent now, and I saw what that did to my father and my mother, and it's gut-wrenching. And I just want to be able to give any parent that hope that there is help out there. And that's why I became involved with Rise. So it's a very important organization for me.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you for sharing that, and for sharing your story and your time and your talent and treasure with our nonprofit organization. I think what's really unique about being a board member at Rise Recovery is you're not alone. At least I would say about half of our board members are parents, partners, or loved ones of people in recovery, or have lost someone to this disease. And that's what makes, or are in recovery themselves. And that's what makes being a board member at Rise Recovery particularly significant and meaningful. And one of the other unique components of Rise is that we are, our front lines are all people in recovery, or for the family coaches, parents who've experienced this in their family and have recovered themselves from, and their families from it. And so with that, I'd like to introduce Frank Janousek. He is a longtime leader at Rise Recovery, and through our Rise Recovery Palmer Drug Abuse PADAT program, as what it was formerly known as. He has served for many years providing support to parents, partners, loved ones, and people in recovery directly. Frank, thank you for joining us today and for serving on our staff every day. I'd love to tell us how long you've been in this mission work, and a little bit about some tips and what is important as a loved one to know first off, and how they can start taking steps forward.
Thank you, Evita. I'm so grateful to be here today. I've been part of recovery since August of '89. I've been blessed with a recovery date of August 7th of 1989. And for that, I'm truly grateful. And there's thousands of people who helped me to achieve that in my life. My journey started then with my own recovery. My spouse, who was in recovery at the time, was having difficulties, and I had to learn how to deal with that. My wife has a little over, I think it's a decade and some years sober today, which is a blessing in my life. I struggled for many years trying to fix and control and enable her. And through the process of working this program, I learned that I needed to turn those focusing eyes on myself and heal myself. And in that journey of healing myself, I developed the tools that I needed to be healthy and ready for when my loved one was ready for recovery. And during that path, my children also, who are adults now, started experimenting with drugs and succumbed to substance use disorder. And I got to learn how to work that same process of healing once again in my life, learning how to set healthy boundaries, to not enable, and how to focus on myself and heal myself. I too am a person who was raised in a home with an alcoholic father. Learning to deal with those issues early on in recovery definitely helped me tremendously. Being raised with a father who was angry, sometimes you never knew what you were coming home to, walking on eggshells, was always difficult as a young person. I got to deal with that in my own personal recovery and look at those issues of adult children of alcoholics issues and what role I played and healed from that. Absolutely. As my recovery progressed, I got to heal that relationship with my father before he passed, to one that whenever he saw me, he asked for a hug and told me he loved me, which is something that incredibly stopped happening around the age of 10 or 11 and didn't happen. But later on in my 30s, when I got an opportunity to heal that relationship with some amends I needed to make, it changed dramatically. Recovery made that possible with my spouse and my children as well. The key for me was changing myself and healing and being healthy and being prepared and ready for when my family members were. Learning how not to enable wrong behavior. I could enable for recovery, but I couldn't enable the use of chemicals. Learning how to do that was difficult because I'm a people pleaser and I wanted to fix things for people. And I learned that the only person I can really fix it for is me. And that's what I endeavor to help other people find and develop in their life, because that's where the true healing is in oneself. When I start to heal myself and become that better person and forgive myself, I can practice those things in love and tolerance with others. I've needed to practice those skills for 31 years now. Most days I do pretty good, but I'm a human being like everyone, and get me on an emotional tangent and I'm gonna react rather than respond. But that's okay in my life today. I have the tools necessary to heal from that today. Rise Recovery has been a big part of my journey as well. Part of my process of recovery is being able to be there for others, getting out of self, and helping others discover their path in recovery and their healing as well. So I am so grateful to be here today and thankful that I get to be a part of this.
Thank you, Frank. And I appreciate you being a part of our program. I know you've helped bring recovery to many lives, and paying it forward is one of the best ways to feel fulfilled in the work that we do. And speaking of that, I know that Jeff I understand you also serve on a board at Lifetime Recovery.
Lifetime.
Is that correct, Jeff?
Correct, yes.
And you may or may not know, but Lifetime is a very close partner of Rise Recoveries. In fact, the 24-hour helpline that's supported by the United Way is a collaboration of Lifetime, Alpha Home, and Rise Recovery. And, like Beth, you pay it forward and you share your leadership to a really important mission for San Antonio. And I want to go back to something you said around the rules, the relationship rules of engagement, and your son and his wife waiting that year, marking the date before, and the importance of boundaries. And that really was a great example of boundaries being a critical piece of finding health and recovery, no matter what family member you are, if you're the person in or a loved one of. Talk to us a little bit about what you had to learn what boundaries you had to set for yourself.
So, I think I'm a lot like Frank in that I want to fix everything. That's just my nature, right? And so that was my first thing. How can I fix it? I want to keep him happy. If I keep my son happy, he won't have to do anything. It's so absurd. The crazy things you think, like you're so all powerful, right? I think the first time we really exercised that the concept of boundaries without thinking of it this way was when we right at Christmas time, when we changed the locks on all the at the house, and he couldn't get into the house anymore, and he wanted to get in the house, and we said he could not get in the house as long as he was behaving the way he was. And that's a tough time. But I will say that, and especially in Al-Anon, the whole point is, yes, you have to be the healthy person. You have to be the person in control of yourself. You have to say, I will have a relationship, and I think Beth could probably speak to this. I will have a relationship with you under these circumstances. And then, and the hardest thing, because even for parents, is, and then when they cross that boundary, you have to administer the repercussions that you said would happen. Otherwise, the boundaries serve no purpose, right? And so that was a big deal. Even after we locked him out of the house, and we told him he'd have to go to recovery. Well, at one point he said, when he was first arrested, I got him a lawyer, and I told him, this is the one lawyer you'll get. So, you need to straighten up. Well, he gets arrested a second time, and it's, he's there telling me, you don't know what's going to happen to me in jail. And I said, I told you would only get that one lawyer. It's the only lawyer you're getting, and it tears you apart inside. But you just have to be strong. Right. And the only way you can be strong is by understanding that what you're doing is the best thing. In the short term, in the limited perspective we often have, it doesn't sound like the best thing, but in the long term, it's the best thing you can do.
That's incredibly powerful.
Yeah,
go ahead,
and
Beth.
I watched my father go through that a lot. We lost my mom, so watching my dad continue to try to fix my sister for many years. I tried to step in and give him a break. And did that role for a little bit, and I realized that was a no-win situation for me. And plus, I'm a sister, so not having that parental role, I was able to put those boundaries up a little quicker. I think where I was like, I'm not going to do. I'm not going to do this. This is, I'm not going to do it. So we were able to kind of cut that off. But the pain that it brings you, that I've lost a sister, she's not in my life, but it is something that I've made sure that I share with my children, and they're aware of it. So they really, they don't have an aunt that is involved in their life or has ever been involved in their life, but we talk about it a lot. We talk about the drugs, the jail, just how that happened. And not in a negative way, but just in a way that's our family story. Because I think the worst thing was that the fact that my father, when he didn't talk about it, and he would hide it away as if, she wasn't a part of our family. So I do, and that's why I appreciate you too as well, Jeff, that you are so out there with your story. Because I think that's what you have to do is just, it's your family, Yeah. Talk about your family. Make sure people understand that they're not alone in this, and that they can share it. And there's some strength in that.
And until you start doing that, I always tell people, it wasn't just that my son was on drugs. We were all on drugs.
Right.
We may not have ingested them. He may have been the only ingester.
Yeah.
But it was controlling us every bit as much as it was controlling him, until, as Frank described, until you get healthy yourself and you say, the question is not how do we fix him? How do we save him? It's how do I fix myself? How can I be in a position where I can enable recovery and not continued addiction?
Yeah. You thinking of something, Frank?
Yeah, I was just thinking, boundaries are difficult at best, especially until you work through those places where you're weakest and you have that people pleaser and you always want to help people, and you forget to help yourself along that path, and you give everything you've got to them, and then you're spent and you have nothing left for yourself. And when you get people in your life and they start telling you things like, well, when are you going to be there for yourself? You're being held hostage, Frank. You got to do something. And when those key words hit you and you realize, I can't keep going this way, and I get that gift of desperation to start taking those suggestions and figure out how I'm going to get healthy for myself by practicing those boundaries and allowing those consequences to be. That's the hard part. Feeling those feelings that hurt so much. It probably hurts me. This is where it's one of those weird places where that old saying, this is going to hurt me more than it's going to hurt you, that was true in my life. When I had to set that boundary and allow the consequences to fall as they may, it was painful to sit and watch. You know, I didn't have a chemical in my body that was numbing me to all those effects. I had to deal with the brunt efforts of all those emotions just swimming in my heart and in my head. And if I didn't have support, there's no way I could have done that. If I didn't have the support of my recovery friends, my sponsor, therapists at the time, God as I understood him, there's no way I could have withstood the pressure of all those feelings. I would have given in. I would have went back to just the same old things, avoid uncomfortableness. When Jeff says we were all on drugs, absolutely. My drug was fixing my loved one. Absolutely. Learning how to take care of myself prepares me to be a better person for my loved one. In many aspects, I learned how to respond rather than react. And I give that loved one unconditional love and allowing them to figure it out. This is one of the best gifts I ever gave my children. In those instances when my children are having those life experiences, allowing them to do that and learn from those experiences is one of the hardest things I've ever had to do.
I think this applies to all parenting. So I think I failed as a parent in that I cushioned my children. I had a daughter and a son. I cushioned them from the repercussions of nearly anything they did. And they were, even to the point where, my son has forgotten his homework at home. Oh, we'll run it up to the school for you. And I think they never really understood that when you make a mistake, that you may have to pay a price. It's always mom and dad will take care of it. It was a bad parenting technique. I'll just say that. And my daughter, who saw her brother, definitely learned that lesson. And she has two daughters herself. One's a high school senior already, amazingly. And I've watched how she parents those girls, and it's all like, look, at the choice is yours. You do this happens. You do this happens. Now, I'm not going to tell you what to do. The choice is yours, but you know what happens, whichever choice you take. And she sticks to it. And that's another, I guess, blessing out of it all, right? I don't know that she would have learned that lesson had we not gone through with her brother.
Yeah. I think for those who maybe want to see a perspective on the big screen, a way that you described some of your story, Jeff, reminds me a lot of the way David Sheff describes his story in the book Beautiful Boy about his son Nick. Both were guests at a Rise Recovery breakfast once, and they have a beautiful movie based on their memoir, their story. And it's a unique perspective because I'm used to seeing stories about focusing on the experience of the addict and the harrowing, rock bottom. This is really about what it's like to be a parent and the reality of that gut-wrenching, like what Frank was talking about as well, that if I make this choice, my child might die. I can't possibly make that choice. And then to find the way to make it. And, if anyone would like to see that as the people watching, see an experience and maybe relate to that from a more pop culture perspective, that is a wonderful book to read or a movie to pick up. And know that there are resources, much like in that story that were mentioned today, Al-Anon, Rise Recovery's parent program. And then I wanted to touch on one small piece that is underrepresented, and that's the siblings. Beth and Jeff, you may not know how detailed we are in addressing the family, but there is a group called New Generations in our Rise Recovery's program, and it is focused solely on being a sibling in a family dynamic where addiction is present. And, what is so important about that, Beth, from your experience as a sibling, that young people who are in the middle of this, a brother or sister, have a space that they can go to process what's going on in their family? Well,
just, how you started the whole show, the fact that so much of the attention is put on the other individual, I really didn't understand it. I'm serious, until my first board meeting where I was like, oh my God, you're just describing my whole childhood. I was like, And I'd already done all my therapy and everything, but I was like, oh my gosh, that is exactly what happened to me. Okay, now I get it. But yes, and it was all the attention was on her, and it was almost like we were cast in these roles where, and I could feel bad about it, but like she was going to be the bad and broken one, and I had to be the good one, and I'm not that good, but I was going to have to be the good one, so that was a lot of pressure, right? But then that makes me feel bad for her, because then it pitted us against each other. So even when she was trying to be good, I was always going to be better. And that was the comparison that was always there. And we're like 14 months apart. So I don't know, it was a very weird dynamic to be in. So she was never going to feel good enough. I don't know. It was just really crazy, weird stuff. Just a lot of sibling rivalry in there. And so as much as I tried to repair it, it just is not going to happen.
Right, right. It's not your job as a sibling.
But as
a big,
and I'm the older sister, and as a big sister, I tried to protect her and save her and help her, and got pulled into that for a time. But then, but being the sister and not the parent, it was easier to push away from that and to be more of like, I have my life, now, and being, newly married and having a husband who's like, we're not getting involved in that, we're not, quit sending her money in jail, like stop doing that.
Creating those boundaries,
yeah,
those healthy boundaries.
We're not doing that. And so that was easier to do. And even hearing my children telling me, tell Aunt Jennifer, we're not an ATM. I mean, my own children telling me that. I was like, well, that's a good message to hear. That is a good message to hear.
Yeah,
okay.
It is.
But yeah, like I'm trying to send my kids to college. Like enough. I mean, I can't bail you out of jail again. No more.
Right.
No more.
Yeah, we reach an end when it's no longer you're no longer talking to Joe or Jim or Susan. You're talking to the drug at one point or another, and
yeah,
I think that's when we start to recognize that this is not even the same person.
And she's 49. No, she's 50. She's 50 years old now. So I mean, we've been through this, and we know what it is, and where what that looks like, and I've had those conversations where with my father, where he's asking me, do you think she's dead? We haven't heard from her in a year, and so we've been through that multiple times.
Yeah.
So.
Well, the hope with the services that we provide are that when that fear happens, or when that need, the need to find a support system is there, that Rise Recovery or places like Al-Anon or Lifetime Recovery, Alpha Home, that they're there for the families that need them, not just the individuals in care. And that's really what's so unique about this conversation. I think I would love to hear just what advice from each of you might you give to other families or individuals navigating this situation. I've heard from some that the question is, why are you asking me to get help? I'm not the problem. They're the problem. It's sometimes it's projected out that they don't need help at all, but not realizing the sickness that's in their family. So, what are some signs to look out for that you might need help as a family member, or some guidance that you might want to share with the family?
Well, I'm a firm believer that it is the whole family. And that's why I'm saying, I think, I would have greatly benefited from being involved in family counseling early on, and having that, individual and then group therapy, and also with my peers. I think a peer and not feeling as isolated and alone, and being able to share that. I think, again, the stigma at the time was much more that, like, there was a problem with your family, that you were different, and that there was some shame with that. I think things are different now. I think that it's unfortunately so prevalent that it's happening to so many families that you can talk about it and share it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Beth, and you're not alone. And I think that's what the takeaway is for today.
Yeah, I think that the first sign that you're in trouble is when you think you're going to save them. As soon as you start thinking that, you've gone down the wrong path. You need to back up and figure out what you need to do. So it's true, as I said, you're not ingesting drugs, but you are living the insanity of an addiction within your family, and you can't separate yourself from that. So you have to first of all admit that there's nothing you can do to save that person. That's going to be in their hands. But you have a life, and your life is worth living. And so you need to get yourself in a place, and Frank described it so beautifully. You have to get yourself in a place where you can be comfortable, and you can put the boundaries that you think are necessary and live with those boundaries, right? And oftentimes, and personally, I don't think I would have gotten there had I not gone to a support group. The support group was so important because it is hard to set those boundaries with loved ones, and it's hard to have those thoughts that, they're out on the street, and I've forced them out on the street, and all those kinds of things, right? So it's always good to have a group of people around you that help you understand what it is you're trying to do in the long term, right? You're trying to create an environment where your loved one can recover, and you're not trying to create an environment where you're leading them deeper and deeper and deeper into their addiction. So to me, that's the support group was just it was the turning point for me.
Thank you, Jeff.
Great.
Frank, any?
Yes, substance use disorder does affect the entire family. It's like many other illnesses. When a family member has an illness that is taking away years of their life, it affects the family. What can we do to heal ourselves so we can be there for that person, so that we can be the best person for them to be able to, when they have that moment and they ask for help, we can be prepared to assist in that as best we can. One of the key signs for me was guilt and shame. If I'm feeling guilt that my family member is doing things and I don't want people to find out about that, definitely something I need to take care of. Those things I can change about myself. My instinct is to change them so that doesn't trigger that response, but that's not the way the disease works. I have to change me. And in that process, I develop as a human being, and I learn how to practice tolerance and love, that true love of, you're doing drugs right now, but I love you right where you're at. I don't feel good about it, but I love you right where you're at. Those are key things. The objective in practicing recovery is not kicking people out of your life. It's loving them even more, but just in a different way. So substance use disorder affects the whole family. I'll even go on record to say it affects the entire community, period. Because we don't live isolated from other people. And what we do, whether it's a substance user or a family member of a substance user, is going to have effect on the people we work with, the people that we socialize with, and the people that we shop in the grocery store with. I know that for a fact because I carry my emotions with me everywhere I go.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. And I think, I think Rise Recovery is blessed to have people like Frank working there day to day, and people like Beth, whose firm has been such an asset in providing marketing and messaging for Rise Recovery's community that needs to hear about us. It's one of the things that we do as a 24-hour helpline, as we mentioned, and it was important for us. And what differentiates when you call that number is, I can't tell you how many times a mother or father is calling on behalf of their son or daughter, or a girlfriend is calling for their boyfriend, or a sibling. We have people who love people who are calling to get help for them, but when asked if that person's ready for recovery, that changes our ability to help that person in need. And so there's only so much we can do if that person is not ready to get help. And then we have to tell them there's only so much you can do if that person's not ready to get help. And the good news is that there are resources that we can direct them to. We can direct that family or loved one to a Rise Recovery family program, to an Al-Anon, to a family support system in our community. And at least we're planting a seed when that family member is ready to get some help. And we could not do it without people like Beth, people like Frank, and then people like Jeff, who are sharing the message beyond our little, focal point. Only so many people hear about the resources, the free resources that are available from this nonprofit. But when people like Jeff can stand up and share their story, that exponentially increases the ability for someone else to hear that help is available at no cost. So I can't thank you enough, Jeff, Arndt, for joining us today, and Beth for sharing your story and all of your services with us, and Frank for not giving up on PDAP. For how many years? How many have you been working?
I've worked for them for 30 years, and I volunteered for 5. No, excuse me, 25 years I've been working for them, and I volunteered for 5.
Wow, that's incredible. That's so incredible.
That's great.
Yes, you all are such servants in our community. And I know some of you may be hearing about the upcoming Big Give. I'm sure Lifetime's taking part in that. Rise Recovery is as well. Save the date for September 10th, which is around the corner, to be a part of this big day of giving. And we thank all of you for watching today and for the questions that you've submitted. And stay tuned for more events. Thank you so much. Take care.